Now the question starts with a clause modifier according to the scientists who monitored its path, and in this modifier we can see a pronoun. Now obviously this pronoun has to be referring to a logical subject, and we can see that the subject of the clause is an expanding cloud. So when we take a vertical scan through the answer choices, we can see a vertical split between expanding cloud and a large storm. And if you try to judge by the meaning as to what had a path, well, one can argue that the expanding cloud had a path or the large storm had a path. But when you think about it, this word itself is good clue that it's an expanding cloud. So as it expands, it could obviously travel through a path. But let's not get hasty and try to decide, because as I said, you could also argue that a storm has a path. So let's look for other points of attack here. Now, if you look at the main clause here, it says an expanding cloud recently triggered. And after this clause, we have a comma and this relative pronoun. Now, what is this relative pronoun referring to? It's referring to the noun in front of it, earth. And if you read the logic here, it would become earth brightened the northern lights. And that's not what we're trying to say, right? The sentence intends that this expanding cloud, which recently triggered a storm, this whole phenomenon is what brightened the northern lights. And obviously, a pronoun cannot refer to a complete clause in front of it. It could only refer to the noun or noun phrase in front of it. And because of this pronoun error, A goes off. Now, when you compare B with A, we can see that instead of straightforward saying recently triggered, we have these two words was what in front of recently triggered. Now, when you see these words in any question, ask yourself, are these two words actually necessary in this position? Because if you think about it, even if you take this out of the sentence, you can see that the elimination of these two words has no impact on the meaning of the sentence. Thereby, these two words are causing a redundancy. And redundancy is such a grave error that you don't have to look for anything else. B goes off. Now let's look at C. Now in C, we have recently triggered, which is straightforward. Now at the end of the clause, we have a comma and then the words brightening and knocking. Now this construction is obviously the present participle modifier which is put at the end of the clause. And we know how this functions, right? The present participle modifier at the end of a clause is a complete clause modifier. And what meaning is it trying to indicate? Remember that the present participle modifier at the end of the clause can signify two meanings. One is a case of simultaneous actions and the other a case of cause and effect. For example, he fell from his bike, comma, injuring his arm. So in this case, this present participle modifier is modifying the whole clause and gives us the result of this person falling from his bike. So injuring his arm is the direct result of this particular cause. In the same way, an expanding cloud recently triggered this storm. This becomes the cause, and this particular cause had a couple of effects: brightening the lights and knocking some satellites. So C's construction and logic works perfectly. Let's hold on to that. Now in D, we have a large storm followed by a comma and this recently triggered. So please don't mistake this to be the verb for large storm, because we have a comma in front of it. This would make it a modifier, the past participle modifier form. So here we can see that this modifier is placed in the middle of comma, so this can be read around, and we have the clause that a large storm brightened the northern lights. But what could be a good trigger here is this conjunction and, which obviously is a trigger for parallelism. So notice this construction, brightened and it possibly not. So if I use the verb brighten here, do I need to say it possibly not, or can I directly say brightened and possibly not? Obviously, in order to have perfect parallelism, we just need to say brightened and possibly not. So this pronoun it is breaking the parallelism. So D can be eliminated. In the same way, In E, we do have this and we have a similar construction as in C, this brightening, which is a present participle modifier. But once again, we can see that in C, this and has brightening and knocking as perfectly parallel constructions. But in E, we have brightening and it possibly knocked. So it should have been brightening and knocking. So this construction again breaks the parallelism. E goes off. This leaves us with the right answer choice, C for Charlie.